The stability of human character is often perceived as a permanent state. Yet it remains subject to the volatile nature of individual thought and external circumstance. Integrity is not a static achievement, but a continuous process of resisting internal impulses that conflict with established moral values. The narrative of an individual named Jake serves as a profound case study in the fragile transition between lifelong honesty and sudden moral collapse. Residing in a small town and defined by a history of struggle and manual labor, this individual represents the archetype of the virtuous commoner, whose ethics are tested by the prospect of immediate wealth. Everyday existence for such a person consists of a repetitive cycle of seeking employment, performing labor, and maintaining a modest lifestyle. The psychological weight of persistent poverty often creates a latent vulnerability to temptation, even in those who consider themselves fundamentally incorruptible. A pivotal encounter with an elderly traveler provides the framework for a multi-staged examination of this latent vulnerability. The traveler presents a series of physical burdens categorized by their perceived material value. Starting with a bag of bronze coins, at this initial stage, the commitment to honest labor remains absolute. The subject views the task of transporting heavy bronze as a simple transaction of effort for a fair wage of 3 gold coins. Self-perception at this point is reinforced by internal affirmations of honesty and a rejection of the identity of a thief. The transition to the second stage occurs at a geographical boundary, represented by a river that the elderly man cannot cross due to physical frailty. The introduction of a second bag, purportedly containing silver coins, increases the stakes of the interaction. Despite the increase in potential illicit gain, the individual successfully navigates the physical and moral challenge of the river crossing. Integrity remains intact because the perceived reward for theft has not yet outweighed the deeply ingrained habit of virtue. The third and final stage of the test takes place at a steep hill, where the elderly man expresses an inability to proceed with the most valuable burden, a bag of gold coins. The physical separation between the owner of the wealth and the person carrying it creates a vacuum of accountability. In this isolation, the internal dialogue shifts from a focus on duty to a focus on the possibilities of a life transformed by sudden riches. The psychological mechanism of greed begins with a single, speculative thought regarding the ease of escape and the low probability of being caught. This initial thought rapidly evolves into a complex visualization of a future characterized by luxury, social status, and the alleviation of all previous struggles. The justification process often involves devaluing the victim, as seen in the rationalization that the elderly man has little time left to utilize his wealth. Conversely, the perpetrator views their own youth as a justification for the acquisition of resources, regardless of the ethical cost. Once the visualization of a successful theft becomes dominant, the moral foundation that was built over a lifetime begins to disintegrate. The act of running away with the bags signifies the triumph of momentary greed over long-term character. However, the subsequent revelation that the bags contained only worthless stones serves as a harsh commentary on the illusory nature of ill-gotten gains. The discovery of a note revealing the elderly man as a king seeking an heir underscores the ultimate tragedy of the situation. The potential for a legitimate and far greater reward, such as a kingdom, was forfeited for the sake of a perceived shortcut to wealth. This outcome illustrates that the greatest opportunities in life are often disguised as ordinary tests of character. A single moment of cognitive weakness can negate years of ethical consistency and lead to irreparable regret. The causal chain of human destiny is rooted in the management of individual thoughts. Each action is preceded by a mental conceptualization that, if left unchecked, dictates the direction of one's life. Thoughts serve as the fundamental seeds from which words, actions, and eventually permanent habits grow. These habits ultimately coalesce to form the destiny of the individual. Therefore, the protection of one's future requires an uncompromising discipline over the internal mental landscape. Negative impulses are not merely fleeting ideas, but are the primary architects of potential self-destruction. True integrity is tested most severely when the perceived risk of discovery is at its lowest. The failure to maintain mental control in a single moment of extreme temptation can result in the loss of a lifetime's worth of progress. The narrative emphasizes that the most dangerous enemy is not found in the external world, but within the unguarded mind. Human history is filled with examples of those who survived great external trials, only to succumb to their own internal weaknesses. Cultivating a mindset of peace, positivity, and honesty is the only reliable method for securing a stable and prosperous future. The story of the Lost Kingdom is a universal warning about the high cost of unchecked greed. It serves as a reminder that the path to true success is paved with consistent adherence to core values, especially when faced with the allure of easy wealth. The irony of Jake's situation lies in the fact that his previous record of honesty was what led him to the opportunity in the first place. His past virtues qualified him for the test, but his present impulse disqualified him from the prize. Moral character must be defended at every stage of the journey, as the final step is often the most critical. Reflecting on the nature of these internal tests allows for a deeper understanding of the human condition and the necessity of self-regulation. Every individual faces their own version of the hill and the bags of gold. The outcome of these moments determines the trajectory of one's legacy and the reality of one's future. Guardianship of the mind is the highest form of discipline and the only true path to lasting fulfillment. Final analysis suggests that the stones in the bag were not just a trick, but a physical manifestation of the worthlessness of a life built on betrayal. The kingdom that was lost remains a symbol of the immense potential that exists for those who remain steadfast in their integrity. Honesty is more than a social contract. It is the fundamental requirement for the realization of one's highest destiny. One must treat every thought with the same care one would afford to a seed that will eventually determine the quality of the harvest. In the absence of mental vigilance, the most virtuous individual is susceptible to the same pitfalls as the most cynical. The journey of self-improvement is an endless process of monitoring the transition from thought to action. By prioritizing the health of the internal mental state, one ensures that the external results of life remain positive and constructive. This profound lesson in honesty and discipline remains a timeless principle for all who seek to navigate the complexities of existence. The weight of the stones in Jake's hands is a permanent reminder of the lightness of a life without honor. Ultimately, the power to shape the future resides entirely within the ability to control the present thought.